Hey everyone, a quick heads up. Most people who enjoy these stories haven't subscribed yet. If you're liking the content, consider subscribing and dropping a like. It truly supports the channel. And I'm glad you're here. Also, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from, so share your location in the comments. I've been driving Interstate 40 for 23 years. You learn things in that time. You learn which way stations are run by decent people. You learn where the good coffee stops are, which truck stops have showers that won't give you a skin infection, and most importantly, you learn to read the road. You learn to feel when something's off before you can consciously articulate it. But I didn't feel it that night, and that's what haunts me most. It was early December, around 1:47 a.m. according to my dash clock. I was running a load of automotive parts from Memphis to Albuquerque, making decent time on a quiet stretch of I-40 through the New Mexico high desert. The kind of night where the road disappears into absolute darkness beyond your headlights, where the only sound is the diesel engine and the white noise hum of the cab at 65 miles per hour. I'd been going steady for 8 hours straight without a break. My bladder was screaming. That's the thing about long hauls, you push through because stopping costs money and time, but your body eventually puts its foot down. I needed a bathroom, badly. The rest stop materialized out of the darkness like a memory I'd forgotten. Old, very old. The kind of place that predates the modern interstate system. I remember thinking it looked tired, exhausted even. The asphalt in the lot was cracked and buckled from decades of freeze-thaw cycles. The light poles, 3 of them, flickered with that dying fluorescent stutter that means the ballasts are failing. 2 of the lights were completely dead. The third one strobed maybe once every 4 seconds, creating this nauseating rhythm of illumination and shadow. My rig was the only vehicle there. That registered in my mind, but I didn't dwell on it. It was nearly 2 in the morning on a weeknight. I wasn't expecting a crowd. The restroom building looked original to whenever this place was built. Cinder block, badly painted a faded blue that had bleached nearly white under decades of desert sun. There was graffiti everywhere, carved into the walls, spray-painted in layers dating back years. The kind of place where you can read the history of boredom and frustration in the scratched and scrawled names. I parked the rig about 40 feet away, grabbed my keys out of habit, and walked toward the entrance. The air was cold, that high desert cold that cuts through your clothes without warning. It was the kind of cold that made the darkness feel more substantial, more present. My breath fogged in front of me as I pushed through the restroom door. The interior smelled like stale urine and industrial cleaner, that chemical combination that every gas station bathroom in America seems to carry. The overhead lights, actually working in here, which surprised me, cast everything in a harsh white blue. There were 4 stalls. I could see under the doors from where I stood. 3 of them were closed. 1 at the far end was open. I've used thousands of rest stop bathrooms. This detail shouldn't have mattered. Most people would walk to the nearest open stall. But there was something about the arrangement that made me pause. The 3 closed doors seemed deliberate somehow, purposeful, and the open one at the end was like a bait station. I was thinking about this, actually analyzing the geometry of bathroom stalls at 2 in the morning, which tells you something about my mental state when I heard it. Whispering. It was coming from behind the closed stall doors. Soft, layered, like multiple people talking at the exact same time but at volumes just below comprehension. Not quite words, but the cadence and rhythm of speech. It was the kind of sound that made my reptile brain scream that something was profoundly wrong. I froze. My hand was on my belt. My jaw clenched. The whispering got louder. Not aggressive, not threatening exactly, but intensifying. Growing in volume and urgency. More voices seeming to emerge from the closed stalls, overlapping each other, building into this weird acoustic phenomenon where I couldn't isolate a single voice or make out anything resembling actual words. Just the sound of human vocalization twisted into something uncanny. I stepped backward. My boot heel hit the tile floor with a sharp click that sounded impossibly loud. That's when the stall doors started opening. All 3 of them simultaneously, slowly. The hinges creaking with that particular high-pitched squeal of metal that hasn't moved in a long time. The doors swung inward in perfect synchronization, revealing absolutely nothing. 3 empty stalls. Toilets, toilet paper rolls, the worn tile walls. Completely, utterly empty. The whispering stopped. The silence that followed was almost worse. The kind of silence that has weight to it. I was backing toward the exit. I remember my legs moving before my brain fully caught up with what was happening. When I heard it, my own voice, coming from the last stall. The one at the far end. The one that had been open. Don't leave yet. It was my voice. Absolutely, unmistakably my voice. Not an imitation. Not someone doing an impression. The specific rasp in my throat, the slight accent I picked up growing up in Oklahoma, the particular way I would inflect that phrase. But it wasn't coming from my mouth. I was running before I fully processed what I'd heard. I don't remember the walk back to my rig clearly. I remember the cold air hitting my face. I remember the stutter of that dying light pole. I remember the sound of my breathing, loud and ragged, echoing inside my own skull. I got to the cab, fired up the diesel. She turns over instantly, thank God, and pulled out of that lot without checking my mirrors, without being fully certain I wasn't about to back over something. I drove for 6 hours straight. Didn't stop. Didn't use another bathroom. Just fed myself coffee from the thermos and kept that rig pointed west through the darkness. My hands shook on the wheel for the first 3 hours. By the time the sun came up somewhere near the Arizona border, they'd mostly stopped, but I still felt the adrenaline sickness sitting heavy in my stomach. The rational part of my brain has spent the last 8 months trying to explain what I experienced. Adrenaline hallucinations, sleep deprivation, some kind of acoustic trick with the bathroom tiles creating strange harmonics, stress manifesting as a waking dream. But 3 weeks after that night, I pulled up my logbook notes. I keep detailed notes on every stop and looked up that rest stop's location. I called the Arizona Department of Transportation. I asked about the rest stop at mile marker 87 on I-40, described the blue cinder block building, the 3 light poles, the specific location. The dispatcher I spoke to got quiet for a moment. Then she told me that rest stop had been officially closed and removed from the system 8 years ago. Demolished, actually. No facilities there anymore. Just empty desert. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And sometimes, late at night when I'm running that stretch of I-40 again, I see it in my mirrors. Still there. Still lit up in that dying fluorescent stutter. Still waiting. I haven't stopped there again. I don't think I ever will. I've been hauling freight across the Southwest for 19 years. 18-wheelers, mostly. Refrigerated units, dry goods, heavy machinery, you name it, I've probably moved it. I know every major route between El Paso and Las Vegas like I know the scar on my left forearm. I know which truck stops have decent food, which ones have mechanics you can actually trust, and which stretches of highway will kill you if you're not paying attention. What I didn't know until 3 months ago was that some things follow you home in ways that don't make sense. It was a Wednesday night heading west on I-40 through central New Mexico. Late autumn, early December. The kind of run where you're fighting the clock because dispatch scheduled you too tight, and you know you're going to have to skip sleep to make the delivery window. I'd been awake for 22 hours. My eyes felt like sandpaper. The coffee had stopped working around hour 18. The cab of my Pete was warm, too warm, even with the window cracked to keep the air circulating. That claustrophobic heat you get in a truck when the heater's running full and the night outside is cold. The asphalt in my headlights was black and endless. No other vehicles. No lights except the stars above, which seemed impossibly far away at that hour. I needed to stop. Not just needed. My body was past negotiating. The rest area came up on the right around 3:25 a.m. Old place. Pre-interstate infrastructure from the look of it. The sign was barely visible, reflective letters half worn away. I took the exit and rolled into the parking lot, gravel crunching under my tires. The facility building was dark. Completely dark. No outside lights, no interior lights visible through the windows. It looked like it had been closed for years, but the parking lot was maintained. Fresh gravel. No debris. I should have driven on. But the bladder doesn't care about instinct. I killed the engine, grabbed my mag light from the door pocket, and stepped down onto the cold gravel. The temperature out there was maybe 38 degrees. The kind of cold that makes you aware of every exposed inch of skin. My breath fogged immediately. The building door wasn't locked. That should have registered as wrong, but I was too tired to process it. I just needed a bathroom and a minute to splash water on my face. 5 minutes and I'd be back on the road. The interior was pitch black except for my flashlight beam. The air smelled like dust and something else. Something vegetal and old, like water that had been sitting in pipes for months. My light caught the hallway. A door on the left marked with a faded man symbol. That was the one I needed. The restroom was small. 2 stalls, 2 urinals, 2 sinks. My flashlight beam bounced across the tile. The mirror above the sinks was large, spanning the full width of the counter. It was cracked. A spiderweb fracture running from the upper left corner toward the center, and so filthy that my reflection was barely visible. Years of dust and mineral deposits coating the glass. I did what I came to do. Then I moved to the sink to wash my hands. The water ran brown for a moment before clearing. I could hear it echoing in the pipes beneath the counter. I pumped the soap dispenser. It actually worked, which surprised me, and scrubbed my hands under the cold water. Watched the lather build. Watched my reflection in that filthy mirror. That's when I saw him. There was a man standing behind me, directly behind me, maybe 3 feet back. In the reflection, I didn't see him enter. I didn't hear footsteps. One moment I was alone in that bathroom. The next moment he was just there, as if he'd always been there and I'd only just noticed him. He was wearing a trucker jacket. Tan and brown, worn at the seams, the kind of jacket you see at truck stops sometimes, worn out and faded. His face was pale, not white, but the kind of pale that comes from not seeing sunlight. His eyes were sunken, with dark circles so deep they looked almost black. His hair was matted down against his head. He was staring directly at me, his expression completely flat. I spun around. The bathroom was empty. I turned back to the mirror. He was still there, and he was closer now, maybe 2 feet away. His mouth was moving slightly, but I couldn't hear anything. No voice, no breathing, just the faint flutter of his lips like he was trying to form words. The panic hit like a physical force. I stumbled backward, my hip hitting the sink counter. My flashlight beam jerked across the mirror, and for a moment the reflection fractured, the cracks in the glass making him look like he was breaking apart into pieces. Then the beam steadied and he was right there, directly behind where I was standing, impossibly close. His mouth opened. It opened wide, wider than a mouth should open. The jaw seemed to unhinge, stretching downward, and inside was just darkness. No teeth, no throat visible, just an absence of light, like looking into a void. I ran. The door was stuck. That's what I thought at first, that the old handle was just jammed. I pulled harder, my heart slamming in my chest, my breathing coming in ragged gasps. The panic made me stupid. I was pulling instead of pushing. By the time I realized that and shoved the door open, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight. The parking lot hit me like a shock, and my truck was running. The engine was idling. The lights were on, headlights blazing, parking lights glowing red. The driver's side window was down. The ignition was on, and I could see the dash lights from 50 feet away. But I'd turned everything off. I knew I had. You develop habits when you've been driving this long. Kill the engine. Set the air brake. Lock the door. All automatic. All ingrained into your muscle memory after nearly 2 decades. I stood there in the cold, my flashlight beam shaking across the cab of my truck, and tried to make sense of what I was seeing. The truck was exactly as I'd left it, except for the fact that it shouldn't be running. I walked toward it slowly. My legs felt detached from my body, like I was watching someone else move toward the vehicle. When I got to the driver's side door, I could feel the heat radiating from inside the cab. The engine was warm, idling smoothly. I didn't look back at the building. I don't remember climbing in, but I must have. I remember grabbing the steering wheel, and I remember that it was warm to the touch, warmer than it should have been. I remember releasing the air brake and putting the rig in gear. The tires crunched on the gravel as I pulled forward. Only when I was back on the interstate, doing 65 miles per hour with the desert sliding past in my headlights, did I reach over and turn off the ignition. The engine died immediately. The lights went dark. I drove the rest of the way to Las Vegas with no sleep. 12 hours without stopping. When I finally pulled into the distribution center in Henderson, my hands were still shaking. I've run the same route 3 times since that night. I don't stop at that rest area. I don't stop at any rest areas in that section of I-40 anymore. I break my runs up differently now, burning my hours at truck stops and established facilities where there are people and lights and things that make sense. But last month, doing a nighttime run through that same stretch, I glanced in my side mirror at 3:47 a.m. He was standing on the shoulder of the highway, watching my truck pass. Same pale face, same sunken eyes, same torn trucker jacket. He didn't move. He just watched my truck go by, his head turning to track my passage. I drove faster, didn't stop until sunrise. The thing that gets me, the thing that keeps me awake on long hauls, is wondering if he was ever really in that bathroom at all. Or if I've been driving past him every night since, and he's only just now started letting me see him. I still don't know which answer is worse. My name's Frank Delacroix. I've been driving commercial for 26 years. Started with a local outfit hauling produce out of California's Central Valley, worked my way up to long-haul freight, and for the last decade I've been independent, owner-operator with my own 2019 Peterbilt 579. She's a good truck, reliable. I keep her maintained, run her clean, and she's never let me down on the road. Until the night she did something I couldn't explain. It was mid-November when this happened. A Tuesday heading east on I-80 through Nevada, somewhere between Winnemucca and Elko. I've been running hard all day. Left Sacramento at 5 a.m. and pushed through without stopping except for fuel. My logbook was legal. I had my hours. But by 11:47 p.m., the fatigue was starting to pile up. That heavy, thick fatigue that makes the road shimmer slightly and your eyelids feel like they're lined with sandpaper. There was a rest stop coming up. I'd used it before. Typical Nevada facility, aging asphalt, a single-story cinder block building, a row of parking spaces for big rigs separated from the cars area. Nothing fancy, but it was legitimate. Open. Maintained by the state. I took the exit. The parking area had maybe 6 rigs scattered across it. That was good. Other drivers meant the place wasn't completely abandoned or unsafe. I could grab a solid 2-hour nap, reset my mental state, and still make good time to my drop-off in Salt Lake. I pulled into an empty space near the tree line at the edge of the lot, angled so my rig was partially shaded by some scrub pines. The Nevada night was cold, probably low 40s and clear, stars everywhere. The kind of clarity you only get in the desert away from light pollution. I killed the engine, set the air brake, locked the doors and reclined the seat. I didn't even bother going inside. The cab was comfortable enough. I had a pillow and a blanket, water bottle in the cup holder, phone on the dash with a half charge. Everything I needed for a solid rest. I was asleep within 5 minutes. The tap on the window came at 4:03 a.m. I know the time because that's what my clock read when my eyes snapped open. Not a gentle tap, a deliberate, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. The kind of sound that cuts through sleep and puts your body immediately into alert status. I jerked upright in the seat, my heart already accelerating. There was a man standing outside my driver's side window. He was wearing what looked like a faded company uniform, navy blue with some kind of insignia on the chest that I couldn't quite make out in the darkness. His face was lean and weathered, the kind of face that comes from years of sun exposure. He was holding a clipboard. When he saw me awake, he smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile where the muscles are involved but nothing behind the eyes participates. I rolled down the window maybe 6 inches. Enough to hear him, not enough to make it easy for anything unexpected to happen. "You logged out?" he asked. His voice was flat, completely affectless, like he was reading from a script he'd read 1,000 times and no longer believed in. "Logged out," I repeated back to him. "I'm just resting. My logbook's clean. I've got hours." "You have to log out before you leave," he said. That same flat delivery. He was looking at his clipboard now, writing something down with a pen that made a soft scratching sound. You need to come inside and log out properly. I didn't like this. Every instinct I'd developed over 26 years of professional driving was screaming that something was wrong about this interaction. The uniform looked real enough, but there was something off about it. The color was slightly wrong for any official state uniform I'd ever seen. And the insignia, I still couldn't make it out clearly, but it didn't look like the Nevada Parks and Recreation logo or the DOT symbol. I don't need to log out, I said, keeping my voice level. I'm just resting between driving shifts. It's a legal rest stop. I'm on state-regulated property. He looked up from his clipboard, that same too-wide smile. You have to log out before you leave, he repeated. Come inside. We'll get it done quick. Every rational part of my brain said no. But there was something about his insistence, something about the way he was looking at me, that made arguing feel dangerous. Like saying no would have consequences I couldn't predict. I grabbed my jacket from the passenger seat and opened the door. The cold hit immediately. That high desert cold that goes straight through your clothes and seems to settle in your bones. The man didn't say anything else. He just turned and started walking toward the rest stop building. I followed, staying a few paces behind him, watching his movements. His gait was odd, slightly stiff, like someone learning to walk in an unfamiliar body. The rest stop building was dark inside. The man reached a switch near the entrance, and overhead lights flickered on. They were harsh fluorescent panels that buzzed with that sound that gets into your teeth. The bathroom area was to the left. Vending machines straight ahead. But the man led me past all of that, toward a hallway I'd never noticed before. Or maybe I had. I'd only used the stop twice, both times just for bathroom breaks. I'd never explored. This way, he said. The hallway was long and smelled like dust and something else. Something old and chemical, like formaldehyde or cleaning products that had been sitting in sealed containers for years. The fluorescent lights were more sparse back here. Longer shadows. His silhouette looked wrong somehow as he moved ahead of me. Too tall. Too thin. We reached a door at the end of the hallway. He opened it. The room inside was lined with shelves. Floor to ceiling, every wall covered. And on every shelf were logbooks. Hundreds of them. Thousands maybe. All of them covered in a thick layer of dust so deep you could see the patterns where things had been moved. The smell was overwhelming now, old paper, dust, decay. Your logbook, the man said, turning to face me. He was holding out one of the books. It was bound in dark leather, worn at the edges, the pages yellow and cracked. You need to sign it. Log out properly. I didn't take it. I just stared at it. What the hell is this? I asked. Just log out, he said. His voice had changed slightly. There was an edge to it now, something that suggested my non-compliance was becoming a problem. You can't leave until you log out. I took the book from his hands because at that moment I was genuinely afraid of what would happen if I didn't. The leather was cold and felt slightly damp. I opened it carefully. The pages were brittle, but they didn't fall apart. I started flipping through them. Every page had the same name written on it. My name, Frank Delacroix, over and over, hundreds of times, thousands of times. Different handwriting styles, some cursive, some print, some barely legible. Different inks, different pen pressures, but all the same name, all over every page in that book. I dropped it. The book hit the floor and pages scattered. I didn't wait to see what would happen. I turned and walked, then ran, back down that hallway toward the exit. I didn't look back. I didn't stop to see if the man was following me. I just moved as fast as my legs would carry me, burst through the rest stop doors, and headed toward my truck. The parking lot was empty. Every other rig was gone. The 6 trucks that had been parked there when I arrived had vanished. The lot was completely empty except for my Peterbilt. Just my truck sitting there alone under the dim parking lot lights. I ran to the driver's side, unlocked it, and climbed in. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 attempts to get the ignition key turned. The engine fired up, thank God, and I didn't bother with any pre-drive checks. I just released the air brake, put her in gear, and pulled out of that lot like something was chasing me. I made it to Elko doing 75 in a 55 zone. No cops. No traffic. Just empty highway at 4:19 a.m. I didn't pull over until I reached the truck stop outside Salt Lake City at 8:47 a.m. 12 hours later, my hands still weren't completely steady. I called the Nevada DOT the next morning, asked about that rest stop. The woman on the phone was confused. She kept saying the rest stop I was describing didn't match any state facility in that location. I gave her the exit number, the mile marker, exact coordinates from my GPS. She put me on hold for a long time. When she came back, her voice had changed. She asked how I knew about that location. When I told her I'd stopped there just 12 hours before, there was a silence. Then she said that facility had been closed for demolition in 1997. It didn't exist anymore. There was nothing there but empty desert. I've made that run 3 times since then. Each time I look for that exit. The coordinates are there on my GPS. But there's nothing on the road. No sign. No facility. Just desert and scrub brush and the endless Nevada highway. Last week I was driving through that same stretch at night, and I saw them. All those rigs. The ones from the parking lot that night. Lined up on the shoulder, parked in a perfect row. Their lights were on. Their engines were running. But there were no drivers visible inside. The cabs were empty. I kept driving. Didn't stop. Didn't slow down. But in my mirror, I could see them pulling onto the highway behind me. Following. All those trucks with no one driving them. Running their engines. Coming up fast in my lane. I haven't been able to check my logbook since that night. I'm afraid of what I'll find written in it. My name is Robert Castellano. I've been driving commercial freight for 31 years. Started with regional runs out of Houston, worked my way up to long haul, and spent the better part of 2 decades running the routes between the Gulf Coast and the Mountain West. I know I-10, I-20, and US 285 like I know the layout of my own house. I've logged over 2 million miles without a serious accident. I'm cautious. I'm methodical. I don't take unnecessary risks, and I trust my instincts because they've kept me alive on roads that kill people every single day. What happened on that stretch of West Texas highway in early October is something I still can't fully reconcile with my understanding of how the world works. It was a solo run, a full load of automotive components heading from Corpus Christi to Phoenix. The dispatch was tight but manageable. I'd left at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday, pushed through the afternoon heat, and by 11:47 p.m. I was somewhere outside of Odessa on a stretch of I-20 that's nothing but scrubland and darkness for 100 miles in any direction. The kind of highway where your headlights feel like the only thing keeping the world from collapsing completely. I was running a 2018 Freightliner, a solid truck, well-maintained, responsive. The engine had a slight diesel knock that I'd been meaning to get serviced, but nothing that affected performance. The radio was on low, tuned to a talk station out of Midland. The cab was warm, maybe 72 degrees, and I had good coffee in my travel mug. Fresh, not the garbage from the truck stop that morning. My logbook was in good shape. I had enough hours left to push through to New Mexico if I needed to, but I wasn't stupid about my fatigue levels. I was alert but not sharp. The kind of mental state where you need a short break to reset. Not a motel. Just a bathroom stop and maybe 10 minutes of fresh air to clear my head. The sign for the rest stop came up on the right. Mile marker 187. The sign was weathered, the lettering barely visible in my headlights, but it was there. I took the exit. The facility appeared out of the darkness like something from a photograph. Not a memory, an actual physical photograph, the kind that's slightly faded and off-color. The main building was clearly abandoned. Windows boarded up with plywood that had been weather-beaten by years of West Texas wind and sun. The paint on the cinder block walls was peeling in long strips, revealing bare concrete underneath. There were no lights on inside that I could see. No signs indicating operational hours. The entire structure had that particular quality of stillness that comes from a place nobody's visited in a very long time. But the vending machines outside were lit. That was the detail that pulled me in. There were 2 of them, a soda machine and a snack machine, positioned on a concrete pad in front of the building. Both of them glowing with that harsh fluorescent light. The soda machine had that characteristic blue-white hum. The snack machine's interior light cast long shadows across the parking lot. It didn't make sense. You don't keep vending machines operational at an abandoned rest stop. That requires maintenance, restocking. Someone has to service them, keep them plugged in, keep them running. I should have driven past. Instead, I pulled into the parking lot. There were no other vehicles. The asphalt was cracked, with weeds growing up through the fissures, but the immediate area around the vending machines had been cleared, swept clean of debris, like someone was maintaining just that specific section. I killed the engine and stepped down into the Texas night. The temperature had dropped since sunset. It was probably in the low 60s now, that kind of cold that feels sharper in the desert because you're not expecting it. The air smelled like creosote and dust and something else. Something chemical, like the vending machines were leaking refrigerant or the paint on the building was off-gassing something toxic. I walked to the soda machine. My boot heels made sharp sounds on the concrete pad. The machine hummed louder as I approached, like it was responding to my proximity. I could see my reflection in the glass. A tired man in a Carhartt jacket, his face weathered from years of sun and road time, his eyes ringed with fatigue. I fed in a dollar bill, took it cleanly. The mechanical gears whirred and engaged. I pressed the button for a Coke. That's when I heard the footsteps. They came from behind me, moving across the asphalt with a steady, measured pace. Not hurried, not threatening, just deliberate. I turned. A man was walking toward me from the direction of the main building. He was wearing the uniform of a rest stop attendant, the kind they used to wear in the 70s and 80s. Navy blue polyester with a name tag on the chest. I couldn't make out the name from the distance, but the patch on his shoulder was clearly visible. The state seal of Texas, the old logo that hasn't been used in at least 20 years. His face was pleasant, unremarkable, the kind of face you forget immediately after seeing it. He was smiling, not a genuine smile, the kind of smile a service employee gives when they've done it so many times it's become muscle memory. Completely divorced from any actual emotion. "Restrooms are inside if you need them," he said. His voice was smooth, practiced. The accent was Texas, but flattened out somehow, like it was coming from a recording that had been played too many times. "Place looks closed," I said. I wasn't sure why I felt compelled to state the obvious, but something about the situation required comment. The Coke came out of the machine with a mechanical thunk. I didn't retrieve it. "We never close," he said. The smile didn't waver. His eyes didn't blink. Not once during that sentence did he blink. There was something in those words, something in the way he said them, that activated every alarm system in my body. Not a rational fear, not a logical assessment of danger, just a pure, reptile brain response that said, "This is wrong, leave now, get to your truck and drive." I turned away from him without saying anything else. I didn't retrieve the soda. I didn't look back. I just walked toward my truck with my jaw clenched and my skin crawling like something was moving under the surface. I could feel him watching me. I climbed into the cab, started the engine. She fired right up, thank God, and pulled out of that parking lot. I didn't rush. I didn't lose control. I just drove back toward the highway at a normal pace, moving like nothing was wrong, like I wasn't absolutely terrified. The on-ramp merged onto I-20, and I accelerated back to highway speed. 65 miles per hour. The road ahead was empty in both directions. The night was absolute. I waited maybe 30 seconds before checking my side mirror. He was standing in the parking lot where I'd left him, still in that same position, still facing the direction my truck had gone, still wearing that smile. But he wasn't alone anymore. There were others. Dozens of them. Maybe more. It was hard to tell in the darkness. They'd emerged from somewhere, materialized in the parking lot behind him, and they were all wearing the same uniform. All standing in perfectly motionless rows, facing the highway, watching my taillights disappear into the darkness. I didn't brake. I didn't slow down. I just kept my foot steady on the accelerator and didn't look in that mirror again. The desert consumed the rest stop behind me. By the time I'd gone another mile, the lights were out of sight, but I could feel them back there, standing in that parking lot, waiting. I didn't stop driving until I hit Phoenix at 8:15 a.m. Didn't pull over for rest. Didn't use another rest stop. Just pushed the truck hard through the night, running my hours to the limit, white-knuckling the steering wheel with both hands. The delivery went fine. Routine. The facility in Phoenix took my cargo without issue, and I signed off on my paperwork like a normal day. But my hands were shaking when I wrote my signature. I've been driving for 31 years, and I've never reported something like this to anyone official. Because what would I say? That I saw a man in a defunct uniform at an abandoned rest stop? That there were others waiting in the darkness? Nobody would believe me. Nobody could believe me. But here's the thing that keeps me awake on long hauls. I've driven that stretch of I-20 17 times since that night. And every single time as I approach mile marker 187, that rest stop is different. The building is still boarded up, still abandoned, but the vending machines are never in the same position. Sometimes they're closer to the road. Sometimes they're further back. The parking lot changes configuration slightly each time. The cracks in the asphalt are in different places. And once, about 3 months ago, I saw someone standing at the soda machine at 2 a.m., feeding in dollars. A driver from Tennessee, I found out later. When I asked him about it at a truck stop, he went quiet. Then he told me he'd stopped there too. Said he'd grabbed a soda, and as he was walking back to his truck, he looked in his mirror and saw dozens of people standing in that lot. Did they move? I asked him. He shook his head slowly. Not once, he said. They just stood there, watching. I haven't been back to that rest stop since. I take a longer route now, add 40 minutes to my trip to avoid that particular stretch of highway. Costs me money, costs me time. But some roads, I've learned, should stay behind you. Last week, I was running I-40 through New Mexico, and I saw a rest stop attendant at a truck stop in Gallup. He was wearing the old uniform, the same uniform. His face was pleasant and unremarkable. When he saw me looking at him, he smiled. Then he blinked. For the first time, I'd seen one of them blink. He walked toward me. I left without my coffee, got back to my truck and drove through the night. I'm starting to understand that they're not just at that one rest stop. I'm starting to understand that they're at every rest stop, every truck stop, every place where a tired driver might pull over and let his guard down. And I'm starting to understand that I'm not the only one who's noticed them. But the question that truly terrifies me is this: when did I last actually see another real driver at any of these places? When was the last time I saw someone who didn't look quite like that attendant? When was the last time I saw anyone who actually blinked? My name is Daniel Pritchard. I've been driving commercial trucks for 28 years. Started with a small outfit out of Phoenix back in '96, moved up to owner-operator status about 15 years ago, and I've logged somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.3 million miles. I know the Arizona highways like some people know their neighborhood streets. Every mile marker between Flagstaff and the California border is familiar territory to me. I know which rest stops have decent facilities, which ones to avoid after dark, and which ones have that particular quality of safety that comes from being well-maintained and reasonably trafficked. The rest stop I'm about to tell you about isn't on my list of safe places anymore. It was a Thursday in late September when this happened. The kind of late September day in Arizona where the summer heat is finally starting to break, but the asphalt still radiates residual warmth well into the evening. I'd been running since 5 a.m. out of Tucson with a load of construction equipment destined for Las Vegas. The route was I-10 north to I-17, then up toward Flagstaff. Standard run. Nothing unusual about the logistics or the timing. I was driving a 2016 Volvo VNL, a solid truck, well-maintained, with a Cummins engine that's never given me serious trouble. The cab was comfortable. The ride was smooth. I had a fresh thermos of coffee that I'd made at the last fuel stop, and the radio was tuned to a news station out of Phoenix. The afternoon traffic had been moderate, nothing that required white-knuckling the wheel or dealing with aggressive drivers. Just steady, methodical progress north. By 3:47 p.m., I was somewhere around mile marker 287 on I-17, maybe 30 miles south of Flagstaff. The landscape had shifted from the low desert terrain into the transition zone where you start seeing more elevation, more vegetation. The temperature had dropped maybe 8 degrees from what it had been in Phoenix. The sky was that particular shade of blue you only get in Arizona. A blue so deep it seems almost artificial. I'd been driving for 10 hours and 47 minutes. My logbook was still legal, but I was starting to feel the mental fatigue that comes from sustained concentration. Nothing dangerous yet, just that awareness that I could use a break. A bathroom stop, maybe 20 minutes to stretch my legs and reset. The rest area sign came up on the right. Mile marker 289. The sign was weathered but legible, displaying the standard amenity symbols. Restrooms, parking, picnic area. I'd used this rest stop before, maybe 2 or 3 times in the past decade. It was reasonably maintained, nothing fancy, but clean enough. The parking area had good separation between the big rig section and the regular car parking. It seemed like the right place to take a break. I took the exit. The facility appeared exactly as I remembered it. Single-story cinder block building, painted a faded tan color that had been bleached lighter by years of Arizona sun. The parking lot was maybe half full, 3 other 18-wheelers parked in their designated area. A couple of sedans on the car side. The building's exterior showed normal wear for a rest stop that gets moderate traffic. The landscaping was minimal, some scrub brush, a few juniper trees providing scattered shade. I pulled into a space near the far end of the lot, away from the other trucks, and killed the engine. The silence when the diesel shut down was profound. Just the ambient sound of wind moving through the brush and the distant hum of traffic on the interstate beyond the tree line. I climbed down from the cab and stretched. My lower back cracked audibly, a series of pops that felt good after 10 hours of sitting. The air temperature was pleasant, mid-60s probably. The sun was still high enough to cast sharp shadows, but the quality of light was starting to shift toward afternoon. I grabbed my wallet from the cab. I never leave valuables visible, locked the door, and headed toward the building. The entrance was a standard glass door, the kind you see at 1,000 truck stops and rest areas across America. It opened easily and quietly. The interior was what I expected. The sharp smell of industrial cleaner mixed with that particular staleness that comes from air-conditioned spaces that don't get opened frequently. The entrance area was small, with bulletin boards announcing local attractions and services. A water fountain, a trash receptacle, a hallway leading deeper into the building. The hallway, I remember noticing immediately, was longer than I remembered from previous visits. That was the first strange detail. I'd used this rest stop before, and the bathrooms had always been just down a short corridor. Maybe 20 feet, quick and convenient, but this hallway stretched further than that. I could see the lights, fluorescent panels recessed into the drop ceiling, extending down what looked like a much longer distance than should be necessary for a rest stop facility. I thought briefly that maybe they'd done renovations, added space, expanded the facility. It happened. Rest stops got updated occasionally. I didn't think much of it. I just started walking down the hallway. The lights hummed as I walked, that characteristic fluorescent hum that gets into your bones after a while. The walls were painted a pale institutional beige. There were no windows, no doors visible on either side as I progressed. Just the straight hallway stretching ahead, the ceiling panels receding into the distance like a perspective drawing. I walked past what I estimated was 30 feet, then 40. The restroom doors should have been visible by now. I kept walking, 50 feet, 60 feet. The hallway was exactly the same in both directions. The same beige walls, the same recessed lighting, the same smooth linoleum floor beneath my boots. The hum of the lights was the only sound. My footsteps were absorbed by the floor, making almost no noise at all. The temperature in the hallway was climate-controlled and stable, but I was starting to feel a slight tension building in my chest. After what felt like 80 or 90 feet, I stopped and turned around. The entrance I'd come from was no longer visible. The hallway extended behind me exactly as it extended ahead of me. Same walls, same lights, same empty, featureless corridor. I could see maybe 40 feet in each direction before the perspective forced the parallel lines of the hallway together, creating a visual vanishing point. The entrance was gone. I stood there for maybe 5 seconds, processing that information, trying to make sense of it. The logical part of my brain was already generating explanations. The hallway must curve slightly, turning my perspective. The door must be around a bend I hadn't consciously registered. 38 years of driving long hauls had taught me that perception can be tricky when you're tired, and I was definitely tired. I turned back in the direction I'd been walking and continued forward. The hallway didn't change. 20 more steps. 30 more steps. The walls remained the same. The lighting remained consistent. No doors appeared. No restroom signs manifested. Nothing changed except my increasing awareness that something was fundamentally wrong. I walked faster. Not quite jogging, but moving with purpose now. My eyes scanning for any detail that might indicate where I was or what direction led to the exit. My heart rate was picking up. That cold sensation starting in the center of my chest. The one that comes when your body recognizes danger even if your conscious mind hasn't fully processed it. The hallway was impossibly long. I stopped again and turned around. Still nothing but the endless corridor in both directions. The fear was becoming acute now. That specific flavor of panic that comes from a loss of spatial orientation, from a situation where the normal rules of physics don't seem to apply. I started running. My boots echoed on the linoleum, my breathing loud in the enclosed space. The hallway blurred past. Lights, walls, more lights, more walls, but nothing changed. The distance didn't diminish. The architecture didn't shift. I was running as hard as I could run in that confined space, and I wasn't getting any closer to anything. The hallway extended infinitely in both directions, indifferent to my panic. After maybe 30 seconds of running, I stopped again, gasping for breath. My heart was hammering. Sweat had started forming on my forehead despite the cool air temperature. I forced myself to breathe slower, to think. That's when I heard the footsteps. They came from behind me, steady, measured, deliberate. The sound of someone walking down the hallway toward my position. I spun around to look. My name is Michael Serrano. I've been driving commercial trucks for 34 years. Started in '90 with a small regional outfit out of Oklahoma City, worked my way up through the years, and I've been owner-operator for the past 16 years with my own rig. A 2017 Peterbilt 389 with a Cummins engine that's never given me serious trouble. I know the highways between Texas and Missouri like I know the creases in my own palms. I've logged over 2.8 million miles without a serious accident. I'm cautious. I'm methodical. I don't take unnecessary risks, and I've always trusted the instincts that have kept me alive on roads that don't forgive carelessness. What happened to me on a stretch of I-44 in Oklahoma fundamentally changed how I understand the relationship between intuition and survival. It was a Tuesday night, late October, when this happened. The kind of late October night in Oklahoma where the temperature drops sharply after sunset, and the darkness becomes almost physical in its density. I'd been running hard all day, left Dallas at 4:15 a.m. with a load of packaged goods destined for Kansas City. The route was straightforward. I-35 north to Oklahoma City, then I-44 northeast toward the Missouri border. Standard run. Nothing unusual about the logistics or the timing. My Peterbilt was running smooth. I just had her serviced the week before. Oil change, filter replacement, brake inspection. Everything checked out. The cab was comfortable, maintained at a steady 70 degrees with the heat running low. I had a thermos of coffee that I'd brewed at the last fuel stop, and the radio was tuned to a news station out of Oklahoma City. The late evening traffic had thinned significantly by 10 p.m. By midnight, I-44 was essentially empty. By 12:47 a.m., I was approximately 40 miles east of Oklahoma City, somewhere around the mile marker 177 area. The landscape was that particular Oklahoma terrain: rolling hills, scrub brush, the occasional cluster of trees silhouetted against the starfield. The asphalt in my headlights was black and endless. No other vehicles visible in either direction. No lights except the stars above and my own running lights painting the highway. I'd been awake for 20 hours and 14 minutes. My logbook was still legal, but I was starting to feel the weight of fatigue settling into my bones. That particular exhaustion that comes from sustained concentration, from the vibration of an 18-wheeler transmitted through the steering wheel into your shoulders, neck, and lower back. I wasn't in any danger. I was alert, responsive, and cautious. But I was definitely at the point where a break would be welcome. The rest stop sign appeared on the right at mile marker 179. The sign was weathered, the lettering slightly faded, but legible. It displayed the standard amenity symbols: restrooms, parking, picnic area. I'd used this rest stop before, maybe 3 or 4 times in the past decade. It was a legitimate state facility, reasonably maintained, nothing fancy. The kind of place that was safe and functional. I took the exit. The facility appeared exactly as I remembered it. Single-story cinder block building, painted a faded beige that had been bleached lighter by years of Oklahoma sun and weather. The parking lot was nearly empty, just 2 vehicles. One was a standard sedan, probably someone traveling through who'd stopped for a bathroom break or a quick nap. The other was an 18-wheeler. The 18-wheeler was old, noticeably old. A Freightliner that looked like it dated from the early 2000s, maybe earlier. The cab was weathered, the paint faded and oxidized, the chrome dulled by time and neglect. There were no company markings on the doors, no identifying numbers, just a blank, anonymous rig sitting in the lot like it had been abandoned there. The cab light was off. I assumed the driver was sleeping. I pulled into a space on the opposite side of the lot, maybe 60 feet away from the Freightliner, and killed my engine. The silence when the diesel shut down was profound. Just the wind moving through the scrub brush surrounding the rest stop and the ambient hum of the highway beyond the tree line. I climbed down from the cab and stretched. My lower back cracked audibly. A series of pops that felt good after nearly 21 hours of sitting. The air was cold, probably in the mid-40s. My breath fogged slightly. The parking lot was illuminated by overhead lights mounted on metal poles. Harsh sodium vapor lights that cast everything in a sickly yellow-orange color. I grabbed my wallet from the cab, locked the door, force of habit after decades on the road, and headed toward the rest stop building. The interior smelled like industrial cleaner mixed with that particular staleness that comes from spaces that don't get much natural ventilation. The entrance area was small, with bulletin boards and a water fountain. A hallway led deeper into the building toward the restrooms. The lighting was standard fluorescent, bright enough to see clearly but harsh enough to make your eyes hurt if you looked directly at the panels. I used the restroom. The facility was clean, well-maintained. Standard institutional setup. Everything functioned properly. The soap dispenser worked. The paper towel dispenser worked. The toilet flushed. Nothing unusual. Nothing wrong. The whole process took maybe 7 minutes. When I walked back out into the parking lot, the first thing I noticed was that the Freightliner's cab light was on. It hadn't been on when I'd parked. I was certain of that. The cab had been dark. Completely dark. But now there was light visible through the windshield. A pale interior light illuminating the driver's compartment. I figured the driver had woken up. Maybe needed to use the restroom himself. Or maybe he'd woken up just as I was coming back out. I walked toward my rig, not giving the Freightliner much thought. My eyes were tired. I wanted to get into my cab, recline the seat, and get some sleep. I had maybe 4 or 5 hours before I needed to be back on the road to make my delivery window. As I passed by the Freightliner, I glanced over. The man was sitting in the driver's seat, completely still. His hands were positioned at 10 and 2 o'clock on the steering wheel. His eyes were open, wide open. His gaze was directed straight ahead, through the windshield, toward some invisible point on the horizon of the parking lot. He wasn't looking at anything in particular. He was just looking. He didn't blink. I kept walking, but I was suddenly very aware of that sensation that comes when you feel someone's attention on you. That prickling at the back of your neck. That instinctive awareness that something is observing you with intent. I didn't turn around. I didn't look back. I just kept moving toward my rig at a normal pace, trying to appear casual, trying not to react to the wrongness of what I'd just seen. The man's eyes didn't move. They didn't follow me. They just stayed fixed on that invisible point ahead of him. His hands remained at 10 and 2. His posture didn't shift. He looked like a mannequin, like something that had been placed in that seat and left there. I reached my rig and climbed into the cab. I locked the doors immediately. That was unusual for me. I typically unlocked them until I was ready to sleep. But that night, I locked them right away. I started the engine briefly to make sure everything was functioning, then killed it and reclined the seat. Sleep came quickly despite the adrenaline running through my system. Exhaustion, it turned out, was stronger than fear. I woke up to tapping on the window. It was loud enough to penetrate sleep and bring me immediately to consciousness. Tap, tap, tap. Deliberate, rhythmic, insistent. The kind of tapping someone uses when they want to get your attention but aren't being aggressive about it. I opened my eyes and looked toward the window. The man from the Freightliner was standing beside my rig. His face was inches from the glass. His eyes were the same wide-open stare I'd seen in his cab. His expression was blank, completely neutral, not angry, not threatening, just empty. He mouthed something. I couldn't hear it through the glass, and the combination of the darkness and the cab's interior lighting made it difficult to read his lips. It looked like he said something 3 or 4 syllables long, but I couldn't make out what. Every instinct I had was screaming to start the engine and leave. Not later. Not after checking my logbook or preparing the rig. Right now. But there's something about being directly confronted by another person that can paralyze you for a moment. The social instinct to acknowledge them, to respond, to engage. It took me a second to override that programming. The man was still staring at me, still mouthing something I couldn't hear. His lips were moving in the same pattern, repeating whatever words he was trying to communicate. I reached for the ignition key. The man raised his hand and placed it flat against the window. His palm was pressed against the glass, right at eye level with me. His eyes never shifted. He just held that position, his hand pressed against the window, his mouth moving in that silent, repetitive pattern. I fired up the diesel. The engine roared to life, that familiar rumble and vibration that meant everything was functioning. I released the air brake and put the rig in gear. The man didn't move. He just kept his hand on the window, kept his eyes fixed on me, kept his mouth moving with those silent, incomprehensible words. I backed out of the parking space and started toward the exit without waiting for him to move away. He stepped back, his hand dropping from the window, and I pulled out onto the on-ramp without looking back. I drove through the night, didn't stop, didn't sleep, just kept the Peterbilt pointed north and east toward Kansas City, pushing hard, my hands locked on the steering wheel, my eyes scanning the road and the mirrors obsessively. I made the delivery at 9:47 a.m., and then I stopped. I had to. The fatigue was overwhelming. I found a truck stop and paid for a shower and a meal, then locked myself in a sleeping cab and slept for 9 hours straight. The news report came through 2 weeks later. I wasn't actively looking for it. I was scrolling through my phone at a truck stop in Missouri when I saw the headline. Trucker's body discovered in abandoned rest stop. The article said that the body of a male identified as Robert Eugene Hackett, age 56, had been discovered in an abandoned rest stop near the Oklahoma-Arkansas border. The body had been in an advanced state of decomposition. The preliminary medical examination suggested that death had occurred approximately 6 months prior. The cause of death was listed as unknown pending full autopsy results, but the investigator quoted in the article noted that the body appeared to have been positioned in the driver's seat of a Freightliner cab, hands on the steering wheel, in what was described as an unusual arrangement suggesting the deceased may have been placed there post-mortem. The body had not been reported missing. There was no indication of foul play. The investigation was ongoing. The article included a photograph of the rest stop. It was the same facility where I'd encountered the man. The same facility from that night in October. I called the Oklahoma State Police the next day. I didn't give my name. I told them I'd seen a man matching Hackett's description at that rest stop on the date corresponding to approximately 6 months before his body was found. The dispatcher asked me to hold while she transferred me to the investigator handling the case. Detective Sarah Whitmore asked me detailed questions about what I'd seen. The time, the description of the man, what he was wearing, the condition of his truck, the strange behavior I'd witnessed. I told her everything except my name and identifying information. I wasn't ready to become a formal witness. I wasn't ready to explain how a man who'd been dead for 6 months had tapped on my window. The detective listened carefully. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Did he say anything to you?" "He mouthed something," I said. I couldn't hear it through the glass. "Do you remember what it looked like he was saying?" I'd been replaying that moment in my head for 2 weeks. The way his lips moved, the pattern of the syllables. And now I realized something that I'd been subconsciously processing all along. It looked like he was saying the same thing over and over, I said. Like he was repeating the same words. What words? I closed my eyes and visualized his face. His mouth forming the shapes. The rhythm of it. It looked like he was saying, "You have to leave. You have to leave. You have to leave," I said. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Thank you," Detective Whitmore said quietly. "That confirms something we suspected." "What do you mean?" I asked. "We found scratches on the interior of the truck cab, on the steering wheel, on the dashboard. Deep scratches like someone had been clawing at the surfaces. The body showed signs of struggle. And when we examined the cab more carefully, we found something carved into the headliner above the driver's seat. Letters, repeated over and over." "What letters?" "Leave, leave, leave, leave," carved directly into the fabric. Dozens of times. Like someone had been using their fingernails to carve the same word repeatedly while trapped in that cab. My grip on the phone tightened. My stomach twisted. "That doesn't make sense," I said. "If he'd been dead for 6 months, he couldn't have." "No," Detective Whitmore interrupted. "He couldn't have, unless he was trying to warn someone before he died. Trying to leave a message for the next person who might encounter him." I never went back to that rest stop. I never used it again. And I've made it a point to avoid that stretch of I-44 entirely, taking longer routes, burning extra hours, anything to avoid that mile marker. But 6 months ago, I was running late on a delivery to Kansas City. I'd made poor time decisions earlier in the day, and I needed to cut hours somewhere. I made the decision to use that rest stop again. I pulled in around 11:30 p.m. The parking lot was empty. No other vehicles. Just me and the sodium vapor lights casting their sickly yellow glow across the asphalt. I went inside, used the restroom, and came back out. There was a Freightliner parked in the lot now. Old, weathered, no company markings. The cab light was on. I got back in my rig and left without stopping. Didn't sleep. Drove through the night on pure adrenaline and coffee. I haven't been back since. But last month, I picked up a hitchhiker outside of Tulsa. A guy who'd had truck trouble and was trying to get to Missouri. We got to talking about our routes, and I mentioned that rest stop on I-44. His face changed. He got very quiet. Then he told me that he'd stopped there about 8 months ago. Said there was a truck there with the cab light on. He could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. The figure was completely still, staring straight ahead. He said he felt a bad vibe, so he didn't investigate. Just used the restroom and left. "Did you see the person's face?" I asked him. "No," he said. "But I swear he was looking at me as I walked back to my truck. Even though I couldn't see his eyes turn, I could feel him watching me." "Did anything happen to you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "But my truck broke down 3 weeks later. Complete engine failure. Happened while I was driving. Could have killed me if I'd been on the highway instead of in a residential area. I dropped him off in Missouri without saying much else." What haunts me most is what Detective Whitmore said during that phone call. That he might have been trying to leave a message. Trying to warn someone. Because if that's true, then the man I saw wasn't trying to communicate with me at all. He was trying to prevent me from becoming like him. And I keep wondering, what trapped him in that cab? What kept him there for 6 months? What was so terrible that even in death, his spirit, or whatever part of him remained, kept screaming the same warning? And most importantly, how many other truckers have seen him? How many of them are still out there on the roads, carrying something with them they can't quite explain? How many of them didn't get away in time? My name is David Kirchner. I've been driving commercial trucks for 29 years. Started with a regional hauler out of Chicago in the mid-90s, worked my way up to long haul, and I've been independent owner-operator for the past 12 years. I drive a 2016 Peterbilt 389 with a Cummins ISX engine that's treated me well. I know the routes between Chicago and St. Louis like I know the scar tissue on my knuckles from 100 minor injuries accumulated over 3 decades on the road. I've logged approximately 2.4 million miles without a serious accident. I'm cautious. I'm methodical. I trust empirical evidence and documented facts. I'm not the type of person who gets spooked easily or invents supernatural explanations for mechanical problems. What happened to me on I-55 in southern Illinois fundamentally altered my relationship with the concept of logical explanation. It was a Wednesday night heading south from Chicago toward Memphis with a load of packaged goods destined for a distribution center in Arkansas. The route was routine I-55 south all the way, approximately 8 hours of driving. I'd left Chicago at 6 p.m., made good time through the evening traffic, and by 11:47 p.m. I was somewhere around mile marker 187, just south of the Illinois-Kentucky border region. In that stretch of I-55 where the landscape becomes less urban and more rural, the highway had thinned out considerably. Other vehicles were sparse. The night was clear, stars visible, temperature hovering around 42 degrees. I'd been driving for 5 hours and 47 minutes. My logbook was clean. I had plenty of hours remaining, but the repetitive focus of highway driving, the constant vibration of the truck, the monotony of the landscape in darkness, all of it was accumulating into a fatigue that was becoming noticeable. Not dangerous, not impairing my ability to drive, just the normal tiredness that comes from sustained concentration. Around 2:13 a.m., I decided a brief rest stop break would be beneficial. The rest stop appeared on the right side of the highway at mile marker 198. Standard signage, green with white lettering, displaying the usual amenities. I'd used this rest stop before, maybe 4 or 5 times in my career. It was legitimate state property, reasonably maintained, nothing unusual about it. The exit came up, and I took it without hesitation. The facility was exactly as I remembered it. Single-story cinder block building painted an institutional tan color. The parking lot was nearly empty. Just one sedan parked in the car section, probably someone sleeping off road fatigue. The lighting was standard sodium vapor. The air smelled like cold asphalt and diesel when I stepped down from the cab. The interior of the rest stop building was what you'd expect. Restroom, water fountain, bulletin boards with local information. The lighting was harsh fluorescent. The air was warm compared to the outside temperature. Everything was clean. Everything was functional. I used the restroom, washed my hands, grabbed a cup of lukewarm water from the fountain, and walked back to my rig. The entire stop consumed approximately 8 minutes. I climbed back into the cab, started the engine, and pulled back onto I-55 without incident. 30 minutes later, I saw the rest stop again. The exit number was the same. The signage was identical. The facility appeared exactly as it had appeared 30 minutes earlier. My initial thought was that I'd somehow misread the exit number, that I'd only driven further south than I thought. But my GPS showed I'd covered approximately 30 miles. The digital odometer confirmed the distance. I was definitely further south than I had been. Yet the rest stop was directly ahead. I rationalized it as a coincidence. Illinois had multiple rest stops. There could be similar facilities at different mile markers. The signage could have confused me. It was 2:43 a.m. I was tired. My perception wasn't necessarily reliable. I kept driving. An hour later, the rest stop appeared again. Same exit, same signage, same parking lot, same single sedan parked in the car section. My GPS showed I'd been driving continuously for an hour, covering approximately 60 miles since that first stop. According to the digital readout, I should be well past this facility. But it was right in front of me. This time I pulled off and checked my GPS more carefully. The device showed my position moving forward along I-55. The coordinates updated with each passing second. According to the system, I was making progress. Miles were accumulating. Speed was registering correctly. But the visual reality in front of me contradicted all of it. The rest stop was here. Again. I pulled back onto the highway without stopping this time. My hands were tighter on the wheel. My eyes were more alert. The fatigue I'd been feeling was being displaced by a creeping sense of unease. Something wasn't correct. Something fundamental about the mechanics of the highway, the GPS system, or my own perception was broken. I decided to take the next exit, skip the rest stop, and see if that altered the pattern. I drove for 45 minutes and took an exit marked for a gas station approximately 12 miles further south, according to my GPS. The exit came up, and I took it. The gas station was there, a legitimate facility different from the rest stop. I pulled in, fueled up, grabbed a coffee, and asked the attendant what mile marker I was at. Mile marker 198. I'd looped back. Despite driving for 45 minutes, despite covering distance according to my GPS, despite taking an exit completely different from the rest stop exit, I was back at the same geographic location. The mile marker was the same. The attendant didn't seem concerned when I asked. He said it happens sometimes with GPS systems in rural areas. Dead spots, signal interference, things that could cause navigation errors. I paid for the fuel and got back on the highway, this time intending to drive past the rest stop exit entirely. I passed it at mile marker 198. An hour later, at what my GPS insisted was mile marker 214, I saw it again. This time I pulled over on the shoulder and sat in the cab with the engine running, my hands gripping the wheel, my breathing controlled and deliberate. The rest stop was approximately a quarter mile behind my position, visible in the rearview mirror. According to every piece of objective data I possessed, GPS coordinates, odometer reading, clock time, I should have been 16 miles further south. Yet the geographical position was identical to where it had been 4 hours ago. The rest stop loomed in my mirror, its lights dim and sickly looking. By the fifth encounter, I'd stopped trying to rationalize it. The mechanism by which this was happening didn't matter. What mattered was that it was happening. Some rule of physics or geography that I understood to be immutable was being violated. The highway was operating in a way that contradicted fundamental principles of distance and linear progression. And on the fifth time I saw it, I noticed something new. The rest stop was deteriorating. The building looked older. The paint was more faded. There were areas where the cinder block itself seemed cracked and damaged. The lights were dimmer than they'd been on previous passes. The parking lot was more cracked, with larger areas of damage in the asphalt. Each loop, it was getting worse. I kept driving past it. On the sixth encounter, the building was noticeably dilapidated. The windows were boarded up with plywood. The structure looked like it had been abandoned for years. The lighting was barely functional, maybe 2 or 3 of the sodium vapor lights still emitting anything resembling adequate illumination. My hands were shaking on the wheel. On the seventh encounter, I saw the figure. It was standing in the middle of the parking lot, directly in my line of sight as I approached the exit. A human figure, motionless, waiting. As I got closer, the details resolved. It was me. The figure was wearing the same clothes I was wearing. The same jacket, the same jeans, the same boots. The posture was identical to my own. The face was my face. Everything about it was me, down to specific details that shouldn't be visible from a distance. The figure was staring directly at my truck. I didn't slow down. I accelerated. The Peterbilt roared, the engine pushing her up to 80, 90 miles per hour. The rest stop blurred past in my periphery. The figure didn't move. It just watched my truck speed away, its expression exactly matching what I imagined my own expression looked like. Confused, terrified, trapped. I drove without stopping. I didn't slow down until I reached the Missouri border. I didn't verify my location until I was past mile marker 287, well into Missouri, on completely different highway infrastructure. Only then did I check my GPS, check the mile markers, verify that I'd actually moved forward geographically instead of looping back to the same impossible location. The coordinates were real. The distance was real. I covered actual ground. I've never taken I-55 through Illinois again. It's cost me money. The alternate routes add 4 to 6 hours to runs that would normally be straightforward. But I can't bring myself to drive past mile marker 198 in Illinois. About 8 months ago, I mentioned this experience to another driver, a guy named Steve who hauled specialty equipment out of Chicago. I expected skepticism. Instead, he got very quiet. He told me he'd experienced something similar, but on I-80 in Indiana. Different highway, different state, but the same basic mechanism. A repeating location, a deteriorating facility, a figure that resembled him standing in a parking lot. He said he'd gotten the license plate number of the sedan parked at the rest stop before the loop started. The sedan that was always there in the car section regardless of which loop he was on. He ran a trace on it. The sedan was registered to a man named Charles Morton, who'd been reported missing in 1987. Missing from a rest stop on I-80 in Indiana. The vehicle had never been found. The case was closed as a cold case decades ago. But every time Steve drove past that rest stop now, the sedan was there. Last month, I was talking with a woman named Patricia at a truck stop in Kentucky. She drives a regional route that requires her to use I-55 regularly. She mentioned that she'd taken a different route around Illinois to avoid whatever weird shit was happening at mile marker 198. She knew about it. Other drivers knew about it. When I pressed for details, Patricia said there were rumors, stories, other drivers reporting loops at various rest stops across the country. Different locations, but similar patterns. The deteriorating facility, the repetition, the figure that resembled the driver themselves standing in the parking lot. She said one driver had reported a slightly different variation. Instead of a figure that matched him exactly, he'd seen a figure that looked like he might look if he'd been dead for several years. Decomposed, hollow-eyed, wrong in ways he couldn't articulate. Patricia said that driver didn't haul anymore. He'd quit, got a job at a distribution center, said he couldn't face the roads again. What haunts me most is trying to understand the mechanism. How is it possible? What's the physical explanation? Is it a localized phenomenon? A psychological effect caused by road fatigue? Some kind of temporal anomaly? Or is it something else entirely? Because last week, I was fueling up at a truck stop in Ohio when I noticed another driver checking his logbook repeatedly. He looked distressed. I asked him if he was okay. He showed me his logbook. He'd been driving for what he documented as 14 hours. He'd covered the distance his logbook showed. His GPS confirmed the coordinates, but he kept seeing the same mile marker, the same exit, the same rest stop appearing over and over in his review of the previous day's drive. He was checking to see if the loops had happened to him. He was afraid they had, and I realized something that truly terrifies me. What if some drivers don't escape the loops? What if they keep driving, keep looping, keep deteriorating along with the facility, until they eventually become the figure standing in the parking lot? What if that sedan at the rest stop has accumulated more than a century worth of missing drivers? What if I'm still in the loop and don't know it? What if every time I check my GPS and think I've escaped, I'm just farther along in a pattern I don't fully comprehend yet? My name is James Thibodeau. I've been driving commercial trucks for 35 years. I'm Creole-born and raised in Baton Rouge, and I've spent most of my adult life running freight routes through Louisiana, Texas, and Mississippi. I drive a 2014 Kenworth T660 with a Cummins engine that's treated me well. I know the highways through the Louisiana Bayou like I know the streets of my hometown. I've logged approximately 2.9 million miles without a serious accident. I'm cautious. I'm experienced. I've seen a lot of strange things on the road. Accidents, breakdowns, the occasional wildlife encounter. But I've always been able to explain them through rational means. What happened to me on a stretch of US 61 in eastern Louisiana is something I still can't fully rationalize, despite spending months trying. It was mid-May when this happened. The kind of May day in Louisiana where the heat is already becoming oppressive, the humidity turning the air into something you don't breathe so much as consume. I'd been running since early morning, left a distribution center in Jackson, Mississippi at 5:30 a.m. with a load of electrical supplies destined for a commercial contractor in New Orleans. The route was US 61 south through Louisiana. A drive I'd made probably 200 times in my career. Standard run. Nothing unusual about the logistics or the weather. By 1:47 p.m., I was somewhere around mile marker 127, deep in that stretch of eastern Louisiana where the landscape becomes predominantly swamp and bayou. The highway stretches straight through the wetlands, with sparse population centers and long stretches of isolation between towns. The asphalt was hot enough to shimmer in my peripheral vision. The air conditioning in the cab was running at full capacity and still barely keeping up with the external temperature. According to the dash readout, it was 93 degrees. The humidity made it feel substantially hotter. I'd been driving for approximately 8 hours and 17 minutes. My logbook was clean. I had plenty of hours remaining. But the heat and the monotony of the landscape were creating a mental fatigue that was becoming noticeable. The rhythm of the highway, the constant vibration of the truck, the unchanging scenery, all of it was accumulating into a state where a break would be welcome. The rest stop appeared on the right at mile marker 129. The signage was weathered, barely visible. The facility was clearly abandoned. The building was a single-story structure that looked like it had been constructed sometime in the 70s and hadn't received significant maintenance since. The paint was peeling in long strips, revealing bare concrete underneath. The windows were boarded up with plywood. The parking lot was cracked asphalt with weeds growing up through fissures. No other vehicles. No signs of recent activity. Normally, I would have kept driving. Abandoned rest stops aren't safe. They're not maintained. They're not monitored. But the need to use a restroom was becoming acute. I'd been pushing through for 8 hours without a proper break. The next legitimate rest facility was probably another 40 miles south. My bladder wasn't negotiating. I took the exit. The parking lot was even more deteriorated up close. The asphalt was broken into chunks in places. The building loomed ahead, its wooden boardings faded and split, its concrete walls stained with water damage and age. As I pulled closer, I began to notice the graffiti. It covered nearly every surface. Names, symbols, tags. Most of it was faded, bleached by sun and weather, dating back years or even decades. The kind of accumulated graffiti you see at abandoned structures everywhere. Visual evidence of time and neglect. But one message was fresh. It was written in red paint across the restroom door. The paint was bright, unmistakably recent. The letters were large and deliberate. They read, "Don't go inside." I sat in the cab for a moment, looking at that message. The warning was unambiguous. Someone had taken the time to paint those words in fresh, bright red paint. Someone wanted to communicate a warning to whoever might use this facility. My rational mind generated explanations. Kids, vandals, someone with a sense of morbid humor. The message could mean nothing. It could be coincidence that I needed a restroom at the same moment I encountered a warning not to enter one. But something about it registered as wrong. I sat there for probably 30 seconds, wrestling with my own biological needs against an instinct that was suggesting I should keep driving. The heat was oppressive. The cab was uncomfortable. But the warning was clear. In the end, my bladder won. I climbed down from the cab and walked toward the building. The gravel of the parking lot crunched under my boots. The heat radiating from the asphalt was nearly physical. The smell was thick, old concrete, mold, decay, and something else that I couldn't quite identify but suggested things had died in there. The restroom door with the warning loomed ahead. I pushed it open. The interior was dim, lit only by whatever daylight penetrated through cracks in the boarded windows. The smell intensified. Mold, stagnant water, something organic and unpleasant. My eyes adjusted to the dimness and began to take in details. The interior walls were covered in graffiti, more covered than the exterior. Words written in red paint, in black marker, in scratches that looked like they'd been made by fingernails. The messages were different from the exterior tags. They weren't names or symbols. They were words, repeated words. Leave, written dozens of times across one wall in red paint. Get out, scratched repeatedly into the concrete in what looked like deliberate, angry gouges. It's still here, written large across another section. And above one of the toilet stalls, Don't look down. My skin prickled. The warnings were specific. The repetition was obsessive. Someone or multiple someones had spent considerable time communicating messages in this abandoned restroom. I used the nearest functioning stall without looking at it, trying to minimize the time I spent in that space. My hands were shaking slightly. The fear was irrational. There was no immediate danger, nothing I could point to and identify as a genuine threat. But the accumulated weight of the warnings, the deliberate nature of the messages, the apparent desperation in how they were written, all of it created an atmosphere that my instincts recognized as dangerous. As I was leaving, I noticed one final message. It was written on the inside of the exit door, in red paint, large enough to be impossible to miss. Too late. I pushed through that door and emerged back into the Louisiana heat. My heart rate elevated, my breathing faster than it should have been. That's when I saw them. Crows, hundreds of them, covering the parking lot, perched on the building's roof, sitting on the hood and roof of my truck. All of them silent, all of them motionless, all of them facing in my direction. Their eyes fixed on me with an intensity that seemed almost coordinated. I'd never seen crows behave like this. In my 35 years of driving, I'd encountered plenty of wildlife along the highways. Crows and ravens were common, but they were always active, moving, calling. They didn't gather in organized masses. They didn't sit motionless and stare. These crows were doing exactly that. I started walking toward my truck slowly, trying not to appear threatening or panicked. The crows didn't move. They simply watched. Their black eyes tracked my movement. The silence was absolute. No calls, no rustling of feathers, just the sound of my boots on the cracked asphalt and my own breathing. My truck was maybe 60 feet away. Each step felt like it was taking an hour. The crows remained motionless as I approached. I could see individual birds now, their feathered details, the slight ruffling of their plumage, their heads turning slightly to maintain eye contact with me. I reached the driver's side door. The crows didn't scatter. They didn't fly away. They remained positioned exactly where they were, their attention unwavering. I climbed into the cab and locked the doors immediately. My hands were trembling enough that it took me 2 attempts to get the key into the ignition. The engine fired to life with a diesel roar that shattered the silence. The effect was immediate. The crows exploded into motion, all of them at once. A mass exodus of wings and feathers lifting from the parking lot, from the building, from my truck. The sky darkened with them, hundreds of birds in simultaneous flight, their wing beats creating a sound like wind moving through dead leaves. Within seconds, they were gone, dispersed across the Louisiana sky, leaving only the echo of their departure. But in my rearview mirror, I saw something that froze the blood in my veins. A figure stood in the doorway of the restroom building. It was human-shaped, but covered entirely in red paint. Dripping with it, the paint covered every visible surface of clothing and skin. The figure's face was obscured by the paint, but I could see eyes, dark, watching eyes, looking directly at my truck. It didn't move. It didn't gesture. It simply stood there, completely still, painted in blood red, observing my departure. I put the truck in gear and accelerated without hesitation. I didn't look back. I drove south on US 61 for the next 40 minutes without slowing down. My hands locked on the wheel, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. When I finally did check the mirror, there was nothing there except the empty highway and the Louisiana landscape stretching behind me. I made the delivery in New Orleans without incident. Everything was routine. The contractor accepted the shipment. I signed the paperwork. I got paid. Everything was normal except for the fact that I couldn't stop thinking about that figure covered in red paint. That night, parked at a truck stop in Baton Rouge, I called the Louisiana State Police. I reported the abandoned rest stop at mile marker 129 on US 61. I described the messages written on the interior walls. I described the warning about not going inside. The dispatcher took my information professionally, but I could sense the skepticism in her voice. I'd encountered an abandoned rest stop with some graffiti warnings. That wasn't exactly a major emergency. She did say she'd pass the information along to the appropriate office. I never heard back. About 2 months later, I was talking with another driver at a truck stop in Mississippi. A woman named Helen who ran a regional route through Louisiana. I mentioned the abandoned rest stop as a casual aside, just making conversation about strange things encountered on the road. She went very quiet. Then she told me she'd used that same rest stop about 6 months earlier. She described the same messages, the same warnings. She said she'd also seen the figure afterward, but she described it differently than I had. She said the figure hadn't been standing in the doorway. It had been standing directly in front of her truck, in her path. And when she'd started the engine, it hadn't scattered like birds. It had simply walked away, back toward the building, moving with an unusual gait that she described as not quite right. She said she'd driven faster than was safe getting away from that place. I pressed for more details. She mentioned that she'd seen a news report about a missing person in eastern Louisiana, a maintenance worker who'd been employed by the state to service rest stops. He'd gone missing about 3 years ago. His body was never found. The disappearance remained unsolved. Helen said she'd recognized his photograph in the news report. She said it looked like the figure she'd seen at the abandoned rest stop. I did my own research after that conversation. I found the missing person notice. A man named Raymond Delahue, age 47, maintenance supervisor for Louisiana State Rest Facilities. Missing since March 2019. He'd been scheduled to service rest stops along US 61. His work vehicle was found abandoned at mile marker 129, empty with no sign of him. The investigation went cold. The case remained open but inactive. The abandoned rest stop at mile marker 129 was where his vehicle was found. I've talked to 3 other drivers since that conversation with Helen. All of them have used that rest stop. All of them encountered the warnings. All of them saw something afterward that defied easy explanation. One driver said he'd seen a humanoid shape in the parking lot that seemed to be made of the red paint itself. A figure that appeared and disappeared, never quite solid enough to be real. Another said the crows had followed her for the next 50 miles. They'd tracked her truck, maintaining a distance, their eyes always fixed on her vehicle. They'd only dispersed when she'd crossed the state line into Arkansas. The third driver said he'd heard tapping on his cab that night after leaving the rest stop. Not loud tapping, gentle tapping, like someone was trying to get his attention without being too aggressive. He checked his mirrors repeatedly, but never saw anything. The tapping had continued for approximately 2 hours before fading away. I've never gone back to that rest stop. I take longer routes now. I'll drive an extra 2 hours if necessary to avoid US 61 at mile marker 129. Other drivers I've spoken with have done the same. We've quietly communicated the location and the warnings to other professional drivers we encounter. It's become an unofficial network of knowledge, places on the highway to avoid, phenomena that don't fit rational explanation but are real enough to respect. What haunts me most is wondering about that figure covered in red paint. Is it Raymond Delahue? Has he been trapped there for 5 years, painted in his own blood, doomed to stand in that doorway and watch truckers pass? Or is it something else entirely, something that wears his form but isn't him? And what were those crows? Were they connected to the phenomenon? Are they part of a pattern I don't understand? Most troubling of all, when I close my eyes at night, I can still see that figure in my rearview mirror, standing perfectly still, watching my truck disappear into the distance. And sometimes I wonder if it's still watching, if it followed me despite the distance, if some part of that painted warning accompanied me away from that place and never really left. Because last week, I saw red paint on my passenger window, just a small smear, just enough to be visible in the right light. And I don't remember how it got there. My name is Victor Morales, or at least that's the name I remember having. I've been driving commercial trucks for what feels like an indefinite amount of time. I can't quite pin down when I started. The years blur together. I drive or drove. I'm not entirely sure which tense applies anymore. A truck that I can't fully describe is there in my memory, solid and real, but the details slip away when I try to focus on them. Peterbilt, maybe. A Volvo. The specifics don't matter as much as they used to. What matters is that I've been on a highway for longer than I can account for. I don't know the current date. I know it's dark. I know the asphalt beneath my feet is cold. I know the air smells like diesel and rust and something else, something organic that suggests decay. I've been walking this stretch of road for what my memory insists is several years, but I have only fragmented recollections of how I got here. There was a moment of clarity, a moment where I still understood time linearly. That's what I'll tell you about. That's the closest thing I have to a coherent narrative of my transition from driver to whatever I am now. I'd been on the road for approximately 36 hours without stopping. That much I remember clearly. I was hauling freight, the specifics escape me now, but it was important at the time. The route was supposed to be straightforward. I-80 through the high plains. Standard run. Nothing unusual about the logistics. But somewhere along that highway something shifted. I stopped noticing mile markers. The signs became less frequent. The landscape began to blur together in a way that suggested I wasn't actually covering distance despite the endless motion of the road beneath my wheels. The CB radio, which had been occasionally active with other drivers, went silent. Completely silent. No chatter. No static. Just the sound of my engine and the wind moving across the cab. By the 34th hour of driving, I was aware that something was fundamentally wrong. But I couldn't articulate what. The highway continued. The truck continued moving. My hands continued gripping the wheel. Everything was functional, but something essential was broken. The exit appeared without warning. One moment I was on an interstate highway with nothing visible except the endless asphalt ahead. The next moment there was a sign. Faded. Barely visible in my headlights. It indicated an exit to a rest area. No mile marker. No highway designation. Just a simple sign pointing toward rest facilities. I should have kept driving. I knew that even then, in that moment of exhausted confusion, some part of me recognized that taking that exit was a mistake. But the fatigue was overwhelming. The exhaustion had become physical. My vision was blurring at the edges. My concentration was fragmenting. I needed to stop. I needed to rest. I needed to reset my mind enough to understand what was happening to the world around me. I took the exit. The rest area was small. Minimal infrastructure. A single-story building constructed from concrete block, painted a color that might have been tan or gray. The lighting was such that I couldn't determine which. There were 2 picnic tables outside, both of them severely rusted, as if they'd been exposed to harsh weather for decades. The parking lot was empty except for my truck. No other vehicles. No signs of recent activity. Just the building, the tables, and the asphalt. No mile markers. No directional signs. Just isolation. I parked the truck and stepped down into air that felt wrong somehow. The temperature was moderate, not hot, not cold, but the quality of the air itself seemed off. It didn't move properly. It didn't smell quite right. The usual smell of asphalt and diesel and open landscape was replaced by something more neutral, more artificial, like the air was being pumped in from somewhere else. The building loomed ahead. The door was standard institutional design. It opened without resistance. The interior was surprisingly clean, aggressively clean, the kind of clean that comes from obsessive maintenance. The walls were painted an institutional beige. The floor was linoleum, polished to a shine. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed with that characteristic sound. There was a water fountain, a bulletin board, a trash receptacle, all the standard components of a rest area facility. Everything was immaculate. Everything was empty. I walked toward the restroom. The sign above the door indicated it was functional. I pushed through. The restroom interior was impossibly pristine. 4 stalls, 2 urinals, 2 sinks with mirrors. Everything was clean. Everything was working. But the space had that quality of a room that had been prepared and then left waiting for occupants that might never come. I used the nearest stall. As I was finishing, I heard movement in the adjacent stall. The sound of someone shifting position. Someone else was here. Finally made it, huh? A voice, male, coming from the stall next to mine. The tone was conversational, familiar in a way that suggested we knew each other. I froze. Who's there? The voice laughed, softly, without humor. You don't remember, do you? I left the stall and moved to the sinks. The mirrors above them were covered with white sheets. Pristine white cotton sheets hanging from the top of each mirror, blocking the reflection. The voice continued from behind me. Go ahead. Look at yourself. You should see. Something in my chest tightened. An instinct that was screaming to leave, to run, to get back to my truck and drive away from this place as fast as the vehicle would move. But a different instinct, one that was stronger, more desperate, needed to know. Needed to see. I reached for the sheet covering the nearest mirror and pulled it away. My reflection looked at me, except it wasn't my reflection. Not the reflection I expected. The face was mine, but it was wrong. The skin was gray. Not the pallor of exhaustion, but the gray of something that had been exposed to harsh elements for an extended period. The eyes were sunken, the sockets dark, the pupils dilated in a way that suggested absence rather than sight. The hair was long and matted. The mouth was open slightly, and the teeth visible in the gap were wrong, too sharp, too numerous. This was not my face. This was what my face would look like if I'd been dead for a considerable amount of time. This is where it ends, the voice said. It was closer now, right behind me, for all of us. I spun around. The stall door was open, empty, no one visible, but I could feel the presence. Something in that space with me, something that was observing, watching, waiting. I bolted. I ran out of the restroom, through the main facility, out the door. The parking lot was exactly as I'd left it. Empty, isolated. But my truck was gone. The parking space where I'd left it was empty. The asphalt was unmarked except for the standard cracking and weathering. My truck, the thing that had been my mobile home for weeks or months or however long I'd actually been driving, had simply vanished. I stood in that parking lot for what felt like hours. I searched the surrounding area. I looked for tracks, for evidence of towing, for any indication of where my truck could have gone. There was nothing. The rest area building was locked when I tried to re-enter it. The door wouldn't open. The windows were dark. Inside, I could see nothing but shadows. So I started walking. I walked back toward the highway. The asphalt was cold beneath my boots. The road stretched in both directions, featureless and endless. I picked a direction arbitrarily and began moving. I've been walking that road ever since. I don't know how long it's been. My memory of time has become fractured. Sometimes I think it's been days. Sometimes I'm certain it's been years. The landscape doesn't change. The road continues infinitely in both directions. The sky above is always the same shade of gray, not overcast, just uniformly gray, as if the sun has been removed and replaced with diffuse illumination from no discernible source. Other people walk this road. I've encountered them periodically. They're all heading in the same direction I'm heading, forward, deeper into the landscape, walking towards something they can't articulate but seem compelled to reach. Some of them acknowledge me, some of them don't, but we all have the same quality, the same gray skin, the same wrong eyes, the same sense of being displaced from normal existence. One of them told me his name was Marcus. He said he'd been driving when he'd pulled into a rest area that didn't have any identifying marks. He said the mirrors were covered. He said he'd seen his reflection and it looked wrong. He said he'd run, but his truck was gone. That was apparently 3 years ago, or maybe 3 weeks. He's not entirely sure. Another one, a woman named Sarah, said she'd been driving through Wyoming when she'd taken an exit that shouldn't have existed. She said the rest area was too clean. She said the voice had told her, "This is where it ends." And when she'd run outside, her truck was gone and the road had become infinite. She's been walking for longer than she can remember. I've tried to leave. I've tried walking in different directions. The landscape remains constant. The road always curves back around. The rest area appears periodically in the distance, always in the same state of immaculate readiness, always empty when I approach it, always locking its doors if I try to enter. The voices are still there, though. Sometimes I hear them coming from the rest area building. Male voices, female voices, children's voices, all of them saying variations of the same thing. This is where it ends. For all of us. I've started to understand what happened to me. I think the truck, the driving, the endless motion on the highway was never real. Or maybe it was real at one point, but I've been gone for so long that reality has become questionable. I think I died on that highway. Maybe I fell asleep and crashed. Maybe I was struck by another vehicle. Maybe I drove off an embankment in the dark. The specific mechanism of my death is less important than the fact that it happened. And when it happened, I arrived here. This rest area. This infinite road. This landscape populated by other dead drivers who are still trying to reach somewhere they'll never arrive at. We're all walking toward an exit that doesn't exist, on a highway that has no destination. I've started to notice changes in myself. My skin is becoming grayer. My eyes are becoming darker. I'm losing the ability to remember specific details about my previous life. The truck I drove is becoming less real in my memory. The routes I traveled are becoming abstract. My name, Victor Morales, is starting to feel like someone else's identity. Soon, I think I'll forget it entirely. And when new drivers arrive, and they do arrive periodically, walking toward that rest area building with confusion and exhaustion in their eyes, I'll be one of the voices. One of the presences in that locked facility. One of the things that speaks from the darkness to explain what this place is. Because I'm starting to understand the fundamental truth of this location. It's not a place where drivers die. It's a place where dead drivers are gathered. A collection point. A repository of people who spent so much of their lives in motion that they couldn't stop even when death arrived. And the rest area, that impossibly clean, perfectly maintained facility, is the mechanism by which they're kept here. The mirrors show the truth, show what we've become. And the voice, the composite voice of all the dead drivers who've arrived before, explains the situation to each new arrival. This is where it ends. For all of us. I think I've been here for approximately 7 years, or 7 minutes, or 7 decades. Time doesn't function correctly in this place. What I know is that I'm walking this road because I can't stop. I can't leave. And every time I encounter a new arrival, confused, exhausted, disoriented by the wrongness of this location, I feel the pull to guide them toward that rest area building, to show them the covered mirrors, to let them see what they've become. To explain that this is where it ends. Because that's what the dead drivers do. We collect the newly arrived. We help them understand their situation. And we ensure that they never leave, just as we never will. The road stretches infinitely in both directions. The asphalt is cold beneath our feet. And somewhere ahead, where the road dissolves into gray, there's always another exit. Another rest area. Another driver pulling in, confused and exhausted, looking for rest. And we'll be waiting, because this is where it ends. For all of us. My name is Thomas Whitmore. I've been driving commercial trucks for 32 years. Started with a regional outfit out of Missoula back in '92. Moved up to long haul in the mid-'90s, and I've been independent owner-operator for the last 18 years. I drive a 2015 Volvo VNL with a Cummins engine that's never given me serious mechanical trouble. I know the Montana highways like I know the lines on my own hands. I've logged approximately 2.7 million miles without a serious accident. I'm cautious. I'm deliberate. I don't take unnecessary risks, and I've always believed that instinct, that gut feeling that something is wrong, is the most reliable safety mechanism a driver has. What happened to me on a remote stretch of I-90 in western Montana fundamentally changed how I understand the concept of intuition and the possibility that some warnings come too late. It was early December when this happened. The kind of early December cold that Montana serves up. The temperature was hovering around 18 degrees Fahrenheit, with a wind chill that made it feel substantially colder. Snow had fallen the night before, about 4 inches, and while the main highway had been plowed and treated, the smaller roads and parking areas hadn't received attention. I'd been running hard all day, pushing from Spokane east toward Billings with a load of electronics equipment destined for a distribution center in Minneapolis. The route was I-90 straight across Montana, a drive I'd made probably 200 times in my career. Highway 90 through Montana is beautiful in good weather. Flat stretches alternating with mountain passes, the landscape ranging from high desert scrub to evergreen forests. But in winter, it becomes a different beast entirely. The road surface is fine, well-maintained, regularly plowed and salted. But the isolation increases. The distances between towns stretch out. The weather can change in minutes. By 2:47 p.m., I was somewhere around mile marker 142, still a solid 90 minutes east of Missoula, pushing into the Montana wilderness where the closest services were getting further apart. I'd been driving for 11 hours and 23 minutes. My logbook was still legal, but I was feeling the accumulated fatigue of sustained concentration. My lower back was tight. My shoulders were knotted. My eyes felt dry despite the coffee I'd consumed. The wind was picking up. I could feel the crosswind affecting the truck's trajectory, requiring constant minor steering corrections. The forecast had mentioned the possibility of weather moving in from the west. I wasn't worried yet, but I was aware. The rest area sign appeared on the right at mile marker 143. The sign was standard issue, green with white lettering, displaying the usual amenity symbols. I'd used this rest area before, maybe 3 or 4 times in my career. It was legitimate, state-maintained, reasonably well-kept. Not busy, particularly. It was situated in a remote stretch of highway with sparse population for miles in any direction. Perfect for what I needed. A chance to stretch my legs, use a bathroom, clear my head. I took the exit and rolled into the parking lot. The facility was basic. A single-story cinder block building painted pale gray, with a sloped metal roof designed to shed snow. The parking area was empty, completely empty. No other vehicles. No traces of recent activity. The snow from the night before was undisturbed except for the plowing tracks. The asphalt was cold and slightly icy in patches. The sodium vapor lights mounted on poles were already flickering on as the late afternoon sun dimmed behind clouds moving in from the northwest. Something about the emptiness registered, but I didn't dwell on it. Rest areas in remote Montana locations could be quiet. It was mid-afternoon on a weekday in December. I wasn't expecting to encounter other travelers. I pulled into a parking space near the building, killed the engine, and sat for a moment in the sudden silence. The wind was audible even inside the cab, a constant, low howl moving through the metal framework of the truck. The temperature gauge on my dash read 18 degrees. I grabbed my jacket from the passenger seat, zipped it up, and prepared to step out into that cold. That's when I noticed the handprint. It was on the passenger window. Small. Definitely small, the kind of handprint that would be made by a child. 5 fingers clearly visible in the frost and condensation on the inside of the glass. The hand was positioned as if pressing against the window from inside the cab. But I was the only one in the cab. I sat there for a moment processing that detail, trying to make sense of it. The cab had been sealed. The doors had been locked. I'd been driving alone since leaving Spokane that morning. There was no way for a child or anyone to have gotten into my cab without my knowledge. My first rational explanation was that the handprint had been made at some previous stop, that it had been there all along and I'd simply not noticed it until now. The passenger window was toward the afternoon sun, which was providing illumination to make the mark visible. It was plausible. It made sense. But the placement bothered me. It was on the inside of the glass, clearly visible, positioned at roughly chest height from a seated position. And the frost pattern suggested it was recent. Within the last hour or 2, probably. I pushed the thought aside. I'd deal with it later. Right now, I needed to stretch and clear my head. I opened the door and stepped down onto the frozen asphalt. The cold hit me immediately, that brutal, no-mercy kind of cold that makes you gasp involuntarily. The wind was stronger at ground level than it had been inside the cab. It cut through my jacket and seemed to find every gap in my clothing. My breath fogged heavily in front of my face. I started walking toward the rest area building, my boots crunching on the frozen pavement. That's when I heard it. Giggling. Faint, but unmistakable. The sound of a child laughing. It came from somewhere behind my truck, carried on the wind, filtered through the ambient noise of the rest area. The kind of sound that wouldn't normally register as unusual except that it was completely out of place. There were no other vehicles in the parking lot. No other people visible. Just me and the empty landscape and the sound of a child laughing. I stopped and turned around. The parking lot was empty. The rest area building was behind me. My truck was parked 20 yards away, its massive silhouette dark against the gray light. Nothing else. No people. No children. Just the wind and the empty pavement. The giggling continued. It was coming from behind my truck now, moving around the vehicle. The sound was rhythmic, playful. The unmistakable laughter of a young child enjoying some game. But there was something about it that made the hair on my arms stand up. Something subtly wrong about the acoustic properties of that laughter. The way it carried on the wind. The way it seemed to bend around the truck. My hands were shaking badly enough that I couldn't trust them on the steering wheel. My breathing was rapid and shallow. The adrenaline that had been keeping me functional was starting to wear off, being replaced by a cold, creeping dread that I couldn't fully rationalize. I looked at my windows. The handprints were gone. Every single one of them had vanished. The frost was still there, the natural condensation that builds up inside a vehicle cab in cold weather, but no handprints. The glass was clear except for the fog. I grabbed a pen and my logbook from the seat and immediately wrote down everything I could remember. The date, the time, the mile marker, the description of what I'd seen, the appearance of the figure in the parking lot. I was operating on the instinct that documentation, creating a record, was important. I didn't sleep that night. I parked the truck at the truck stop and sat in the cab with all the locks engaged. My cell phone in my hand, the interior lights on. I called the Montana State Police non-emergency number at 3:47 a.m. and reported what I'd seen. The dispatcher took my statement but seemed skeptical. I didn't blame her. What I was describing sounded like either a hallucination or the product of road fatigue and cold stress. The officer who called me back the next morning was more attentive. He asked detailed questions about the location and what I'd observed. When I finished my account, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "Have you heard about any missing children in that area?" My stomach tightened. "No," I said. "Why?" "There was a case about 8 years ago," the officer said. 3 children disappeared from a rest stop about 15 miles west of the location you described. All 3 were between the ages of 5 and 8. The case was never solved. The children were never found. The investigation went cold. I couldn't speak for several seconds. "Officer," I said finally, "what I saw didn't look like any normal child. The thing in that parking lot. There was something wrong about it." "I believe you," he said quietly. "More than one driver has reported unusual activity at rest stops in that area. Children's voices, handprints on vehicle windows. Some drivers have reported seeing figures in the parking lot that match the descriptions of the missing children. But when we investigate, we find nothing. No evidence. No bodies. Nothing." "What does that mean?" I asked. "I don't know," the officer said. "I honestly don't know. I never found out if that officer pursued any official investigation. I never heard back from him. I've made it a point to avoid that rest stop since that day. I take longer routes, burn extra hours, anything to avoid that stretch of I-90. But I've talked to other drivers, quietly, carefully, and I've discovered that I'm not alone in what I've experienced. A driver named Marcus mentioned seeing handprints on his windows at a rest stop in northern Washington. He said he also heard giggling. He said the hands seemed to be pressing from inside the cab, and when he looked at the ground, he found small footprints in the snow surrounding his vehicle. But when he drove away and came back an hour later, out of morbid curiosity, the footprints were gone, but so was the snow. All of it. The parking lot was dry asphalt. Another driver named Catherine described seeing a little boy waving at her from the passenger window of her truck while she was driving. She said she was the only person in the vehicle. She said the boy's smile was distorted, too wide, showing too many teeth. All of these encounters happened at rest stops in remote areas. Montana, Washington, Idaho, Northern California. All of them involving handprints on windows. All of them involving the sounds of children. All of them leaving the drivers with that particular kind of fear that you can't quite rationalize away. And last month, I made the mistake of checking the archived news from that region. Missing children. There had been dozens of them over the past 40 years. Most of the cases went cold. Most were never solved. The missing children were predominantly young, between 5 and 10 years old. Most of them disappeared from rest stops and roadside facilities in remote areas. The most recent disappearance was 6 months ago. A little girl named Emma Sanchez, age 7, went missing from a rest stop outside of Eugene, Oregon. She'd been traveling with her family. She walked into the bathroom for approximately 3 minutes. When her mother checked on her, she was gone. They found her shoes inside the bathroom, but they never found Emma. What haunts me most is wondering if those handprints on my windows were trying to communicate something. If those sounds I heard were attempts at contact. If the figure in the parking lot, the thing wearing a child's body like a suit, was trying to show me something. I've started keeping detailed records of my routes now. I check the news for missing children in areas where I've experienced unusual activity. I've created a map marking rest stops where drivers have reported similar experiences. The pattern is undeniable. These things are real. They're collecting something, or collecting someone. And I've come to the terrible realization that I might have been one of the few people who encountered them and survived with my sanity intact. What terrifies me most is wondering what happened to those who didn't drive away. What happened to those who investigated further? What happened to those who didn't listen to their instincts? Because every missing child case I've found has one detail in common. There's always a rest stop involved. Always an isolated facility. Always the last confirmed sighting in a remote location where help couldn't reach them in time. And I've started to suspect that the handprints on my windows weren't just a warning. They were an invitation.